And joining me now is former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Sean, thanks for being here. It's great to talk to you.
Good afternoon, John. How are you?
All right. And to the audience at home, Sean has a new book coming out next month called The Briefing, which we'll talk about later. But first, I wanted to get your take on a lot of the information that's happening now with the investigation, the Russia investigation. It's specifically this much anticipated Inspector General's report. We're getting some information now that this report contains some damning information for former FBI Director Jim Comey. And in fact, he defied authority more than once while he was in charge of the Bureau. The DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz reportedly used the term insubordinate when describing Comey's handling of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's secret email server. Also, Comey was apparently ignoring objections from the Department of Justice officials about reopening that investigation that didn't jive with the agency's policy on not impacting important elections. But specifically, I wanted to get your take on what this means for Jim Comey.
Well, actually, I think the bigger issue is what this means for Donald Trump and the country. The idea that this report, which we've been hearing about for a while now, it's supposedly in the 400-plus page range, really goes to the heart at what the FBI was doing during the election cycle and what specifically Jim Comey was doing in defiance of, normal protocols. And I think what that really portends is a bad circumstance for what was happening back during the election cycle. And that's what I think the big focus is. I think, obviously the media is going to focus on Jim Comey, and rightly so in terms of his actions. But I think that there's going to be probably some serious outrage about how it happened, how it was allowed to happen, and what's being done to prevent it from happening again.
Well, today the president tweeted, "When will the people start saying thank you, Mr. President, for firing Jim Comey?" Now, Sean, a lot of the big media, which you talked about, MSNBC and those folks, they keep pointing back to that interview that President Trump did with Lester Holt, where he talked about Russia while he was talking about the firing of Jim Comey. Can you explain for us what the president meant there and clear up some of this confusion that MSNBC seems to have?
Well, I'll tell you what I take out of it. I think the president was clearly saying, look, I had already decided in my mind that this guy hadn't done his job right. I got this letter. He gave me the reason to do it. And so I just went, I took their recommendation. I think they've tried to twist this a little bit to make it sound like that he was, it was because of the Russia thing. I think he had always questioned Comey's capacity for the job and the way that he had done it and the way that he handled it. And I think when he got those recommendations, he made it very clear that that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, I think this is like, the election campaign announcement. If you really parse the words, you can make up a lot of different meanings for where the president's trying to go, and it's just the way he talks. It's just I don't think a lot of the media are used to a president that speaks the way Donald Trump talks. Now, when we talk about the FBI, do you feel like the man President Trump has put in charge of the FBI can run it appropriately, Christopher Wray?
I know that the president interviewed a lot of folks when he was trying to find someone to fill the director of the FBI slot. Christopher Wray came highly recommended by a lot of people in law enforcement within the FBI, and I've seen nothing that would lead me to believe that he hasn't been doing a great job.
All right. Well, let's move on. And since you have been a press secretary, you can weigh in on your firsthand experiences. I want to talk about the media's recent treatment of Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Yesterday, we asked Bill O'Reilly about this, but I want to get your take since you've actually stood at the podium and faced some of these same reporters. I want you to take a listen to the exchange this week between Sanders and April Ryan. Take a listen.
Is the president aware that taking the knee is about police-involved shootings?
The president has made his position crystal clear, and that it's about, I let you rudely interrupt me and your colleague. I'm going to ask that you allow me to finish my answer. I would be happy to answer it if you would stop talking long enough to let me do that. If you go back to what the original intent was, this has been made a political argument of which the president is not going to back down from, and he's been clear on it. Stephen, last question. April, I've addressed your question. I'm not going to continue to engage with you.
This is not the White House Correspondents' Dinner. In my 2 cents, what Michelle Wolf did there was not only not funny, it was in poor taste, but I think what April Ryan did here was worse. She let her emotions get the better of her, and to her credit, Sarah Huckabee Sanders shut her down. What do you think when you see these types of interactions between the current press secretary?
Ebbed and flowed a little bit, but it's the funny part about it is I don't think anybody's learned anything, meaning that I think you see people like that get up and grandstand, and it's almost nonsensical that Sarah asked and answered the question multiple times in that particular instance. And I think they kept thinking, well, if I just keep asking it. But it was clear that that was an attempt to create a clip to go on CNN right afterwards. I mean, that's what this has gotten down to. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is the utility of the briefing, because really what I think is interesting is that the briefing in the press office exists to provide information and answer the questions of reporters and members of the public. And what the briefing has become, and exchanges like that prove it, are more of, theatrics and attempts to get a clip so that they can post something on YouTube or get on cable news.
So true. Now, also last night, TBS comedian Samantha Bee was back on the air after she used the C word to describe Ivanka Trump. I don't know if you caught her show last night, but here was her apology.
Hi, I'm Samantha Bee. You know, a lot of people were offended and angry that I used an epithet to describe the president's daughter and advisor last week. It is a word I have used on the show many times, hoping to reclaim it. This time, I used it as an insult. I crossed the line, I regret it, and I do apologize for that. Many men were also offended by my use of the word. I do not care about that. I hate that this distracted from more important issues. I hate that I did something to contribute to the nightmare of 24-hour news cycles that we're all white-knuckling through. I should have known that a potty-mouthed insult would be inherently more interesting to them than juvenile immigration policy. I would do anything to help those kids. I hate that this distracted from them, so to them, I am also sorry.
There's two things about what Samantha Bee said that I think get overlooked. One is the rest of what she said, which is, we got stuck on the word. But then She said something like, put on something short and cute and go in there, which is equally insulting to not just Ivanka, but to all women. And I think it undermines the cause. And second, like you said, she used the apology as a means to promote herself again and to try to attract viewers. I mean, it was the most self-serving non-apology I've ever seen.
Do you think there's a double standard? We talked about this a lot. I mean, she is a comedian, of course, and TBS is a cable show. It's not necessarily the same as a network news show. But do you think she should still have her job?
No, I don't. And I tell you why. It's because I think when people make when they make a mistake and they ask for forgiveness, that's one thing. This wasn't like some random mistake. They scripted it. Right. They put it all through the teleprompter. Executives saw it. I mean, everybody went through it. This wasn't like a spur-of-the-moment utterance where she said, you know what I really think, and then said, wow, I misspoke. They literally sat down and scripted this and thought that it would be good. And it wasn't until the backlash that they apologized. So it wasn't even like they aired it and said, wow, that was on the line. The audience laughed at it and they went on. And I think that's very different than somebody who realizes that they've stepped in it and immediately says, whoa, that didn't come out the way I intended. It's, my mistake. And I think that you saw in her non-apology what I'm talking about, which is that she used that as a vehicle to try to, bring more viewers in and make her bigger point and say, well, I should have used different words because the broader point was what I was getting at. It's either you're wrong or you're not. Right. And I think that the left immediately forgave her. Not even forgave her. I don't think that they thought it was an issue. The interesting thing is down here in Virginia, we have a guy running in the Virginia 10 that is running a commercial that calls the President of the United States a worse threat than Osama bin Laden. And there has been zero media interest. Why? Because I think a lot of them kind of agree with the Democrats on this. They don't want to call it out most of the time, I think, because they actually agree with it.
Well, I think some people don't cover it because this guy wants coverage for that campaign commercial. They don't buy the airtime. They make these ridiculous campaign commercials and hope people play them on TV, but that's just my opinion. Speaking of opinions, I wanted to get yours on this new Pew Research Center study that says 70% of Americans are suffering from news fatigue along party lines. 80% of Republicans are experiencing media exhaustion versus just 60% of Democrats. But do you feel like that is because Republicans are experiencing this more? There's just so much negative coverage of President Trump.
Yeah, I think so. And I think because no matter where you turn right now, so if you turn into the late night shows, it's all about President Trump, trying to poke fun at him. And what's happened is that, you even go to the supermarket and the tabloids are all about President Trump. And so I think we have now pop culture has become politics. And so it's not that you can kind of just tune into the news and tune out of it. Sort of politics has become pop culture, and so everywhere you go, there's something about Trump or the White House or palace intrigue. And I think people are looking for ways to sort of say, I want to tune into the news, I want to get my information, and I want to go, tune out, if you will.
Yeah, fair enough. As we wrap up here, Sean, I do want to talk about your book. It's called The Briefing: Politics, the Press, and the President. Do you think your book will change people's opinions about the way the press covers the president and the White House?
That's actually a great question. I think what I've tried to do is lay it out and say, these were the exchanges, this was the information before, this is how it played out, and kind of leave it up to people to make their own decisions. I believe that if you look at a lot of the issues and examples and events that I laid out, I got to kind of believe that you kind of come away saying, wow, that I didn't realize that the press acted that way, or some of these individuals behave in such a way or interact in a way that we didn't see that before. So I hope it's constructive in the sense that I think for a lot of these reporters, they never actually understand the other side of it. And I think some of them could do well to read it and to say, is that really an appropriate way to engage in that kind of discussion?
Well, I look forward to reading it. It comes out July 24th. Sean, thanks for coming in today. Great to see you.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Newsmax TV. Watch us on Dish, DirecTV, AT&T Uverse, Verizon Fios, or download our free app. Don't have Newsmax TV? Call your local cable provider and request Newsmax today.